time with the Eightfold Path, mainly with the first 6 spokes of the Eightfold Path. As we continue our exploration of ethics. And what happens is I think about this all week long and do some reading, and then I write down whatever seems to come to my mind, and then, you know, inevitably after I've written it down, I keep thinking about it, and then I have more things to add, and there are always more things to add. It could spend, you know, a whole talk, a whole practice period on just the Eightfold Path. But, you know, for now, we'll just, you know, just bring to mind what the Eightfold Path is and how it can work, and how it flows naturally from the first three you know, of the 4 Noble Truths, the first 3 truths that we've already been talking about. So I tend to think this is when we bring our practice into the world. And I kind of think of this as how to be a contemplative in the world. Zen, we tend to make a distinction between meditation and contemplation in Zen. And with meditation being what we do on the cushion, letting go of everything. And contemplation, how we bring the mind of meditation off the cushion into the world and become a kind of contemplative in the world. There are lots of contemplative paths, and this is one of them, and worthy of attention and practice. So, so we're bringing, in a sense, we're bringing the coming from the universal to the particular, actualizing the concentration and insight of meditation in activity. So, as I said, the first 3 Noble Truths prepare for the 4th, opening the clear seeing of wisdom and the kindness and gentleness of compassion toward the self. It is a practice of becoming aware of our deep connection with everything else that exists through the understanding of our own suffering, and thereby softening the demands of the ego, the demands of the okay, I have a word here that I can't read. Well, of the ego, the separated self. Now, you probably remember that the Eightfold Path is often depicted as a wheel with 8 spokes, each of them connected to the others. And flowing from the 3rd Noble Truth, the practice of meditation that I just talked about, is the first spoke of the wheel is view. And I'm going to leave out the words that we were talking about last time and just talk about these without an adjective, without a definer. But just think, you can remember that last week we talked about, instead of right view, we talked about wholesome, effective, appropriate, and various other words. But let's just see if we can talk about these in their just raw presence today. Sometimes view, in fact, is spoken of as no view or no views, meaning absence of the centrality or the prison of, or the narrowness of individual view or opinion. Of course, its complete absence is not possible, nor is it desirable in a way. But the view of meditation, of the mind of meditation, inevitably offers the possibility of something bigger, a more spacious, more inclusive, bigger view through meditation. It's a view that is wide, deep, clear, and calm. And just as I've spoken about the cultivation of the clear, calm acceptance of the self in the equanimity of the awareness of meditation, just so is this regard, this wise and compassionate view, now turned towards the world, ever widening. And this opens the possibility that there is more to learn, which of course there always is. And this view understands that opinions are by nature limited and self-centered. And this view sees the suffering not just of the self, but of the other, understanding that to live is to suffer, and that the relief of my suffering inevitably spills out to offer relief to the suffering to others or to the other, depending on the circumstances. View opens the possibility of further investigation involving the humility of acceptance that our personal opinions are always limited, and invoking the courage to see more fully and clearly so as to be able to act effectively. So that is the first spoke of the Eightfold Path. And then the next spoke is derived from this wider and more inclusive view, and in which we develop an intention to relieve suffering, both of ourselves and of others. So this spoke is intention. And again, I'm going to say this over and over again because it's so important and so fundamental. Seeing and accepting my own suffering inevitably enables me to see the suffering of others, and the motivation to relieve their suffering naturally flows from there. The self naturally turns towards the other in radical connection. And sometimes recognizing that I, in my sense of separateness, have contributed to the suffering of the other person, whether in and to the world, the suffering of the world, whether in the case of our further study, whether in nature or society. And that an intention to alleviate that suffering arises, an intention to act to alleviate. An interesting expansion of intention that I've found as I've been studying the race relations is to also include the awareness of impact. That our intention sometimes may lead us to do something that from our limited personal view, which doesn't completely go away, and we may not understand how our intention impacts others, and our action derived out of a good intention can be painful to other people. And so it's important to expand our inquiry to examine this possibility. Okay, so having cultivate a wide and deep view, and having formed the intention to alleviate suffering, we turn next to speech. Taking care that what we say is true, kind, helpful, conducive to harmony, and necessary. Sometimes these are thought of as the classic instructions of the Buddha, but they also have been ascribed to Socrates and to many other great teachers. So true, kind, helpful, conducive to harmony, and necessary. Now, I don't personally always remember to think about these points before I speak, but I think it's a useful framework for ongoing investigation. So often we just blurt out something in our anxiety to say something, or to connect, or to have our point of view respected and honored. Sometimes we blurt out things without thinking about how they may impact others. So sometimes this spoke of speech includes saying nothing. Maybe it's that you could say it's partly finding the middle way between impulsivity and reticence. Sometimes difficult truths must be expressed, and reticence could merely mask avoidance, or we're afraid to be seen, or we think that we have to be perfect to show ourselves as being perfect. But inevitably, we must speak, and therefore we aim to be the calm voice in the room. And from speech, we move to action. And this is the area that's spoken of as skillful means and appropriate response. Another term for this is liberative technique, the technique of action that promotes liberation, true liberation. And this is a term that Robert Thurman, a scholar of Tibetan Buddhism, uses. Action that liberates, that frees us from suffering, that's practical to the point, and refrain from causing harm. And again, with the humility to know my limitations. I can't heal the world, but I'm obliged to do what I can in my circumstances. I'm not Mother Teresa. I'm this person in these circumstances, in this set of relationships, with these resources, finding the middle way of caring for both myself and for others, refraining from harmful action as best I can, trying to see what is needed and doing it. And with this consciousness of view, intention, speech, and action, what we do with this one wild and precious life, as Mary Oliver expressed it, how will we choose to use our abilities and talents? Most of us have chosen a professional occupation, teaching, counseling, advising, healthcare, all in service to others. You could say this is the navigator crossing the river between the shores, between the shore of suffering and the shore of liberation. And sometimes we lose sight of our intention to relieve suffering in the demands of professional life. The regulation, the reporting, the billing, the benefits, the bureaucracy, the fatigue, the repetition. Some of us are retired. How will we use our retired life, our one wild and precious retired life? With the humility to view our whole lives and the courage to serve effectively. I think that no matter how we occupy ourselves, we need to constantly remind ourselves of the intention to serve and recommit wholeheartedly. And that brings me to the sixth spoke, effort. I'll tell you a secret, this is my favorite one, because of the wholehearted aspect. The use of energy and attention in every aspect of action, everything, doing the laundry, washing the dishes, figuring out how to deal with the mouse problem. And I don't mean this kind of mouse. I first started thinking about effort when I was sewing my blue rakusu, the ritual garment that lay people who have received the precepts in our ritual called Jukai. And the practice has traditionally been to sew it yourself ahead of time with instruction. And so I was sewing this, and it took, I think the whole thing lasted about 1.5 years to get it done. for various reasons. But it's a detailed and precise practice. You sew small pieces of cloth together with tiny stitches the size of a poppy seed. And you learn to concentrate all your effort and energy and intention into every single stitch, one by one, over and over and over again. I haven't counted the stitches. Maybe Alice has, who's the teacher from Facing the Mountain. And, but I would guess it's certainly hundreds and maybe thousands of stitches. And if you start thinking, when will this be done? Or something like that, or when can I stop doing this for a while and watch a movie on Netflix, you lose the joy of it. If you pour yourself into every single stitch, you're completely there. And then you become completely connected to it, completely one with it. You use every ounce of yourself in action. So that's, to me, effort, is that you expend yourself, your complete self, by the presence of what you're doing. So those are the 6 action spokes. And then we circle around again to concentration and meditation. Back to the 3rd noble step, and then round and round we go. And the interesting thing is, and I'm sorry that I don't have a screen share for this, is that always in the center of the spoke is something that kind of looks like yin and yang, only it's 3 things. And does anybody know what those 3 things are in the middle of the Eightfold Path, the spokes of the Eightfold Path? Does anybody remember that? Because I think this is really interesting. Okay, those 3 things, those 3 swirls that are deeply connected and obviously moving constantly, because the spokes of the wheel turn round and round and round. Those 3 are greed, hate, and delusion. So they are right there in the middle, pushing. They are the suffering of greed, hate, and delusion, which push us towards awakening. So I think that's really interesting.